And in the back of my mind, there is a voice or a feeling of, what is the point in doing this? Nobody cares about you and what you're saying. Like, you have nothing interesting to say. There are already people who are prettier and funnier and more engaging and more interesting that have podcasts like this. So why would anyone listen to mine? No angle that you have is unique or interesting. Why would anyone care? You're just embarrassing yourself. Stop doing this. Okay. Hello, let's just turn off my flow state productivity music. Welcome back, and welcome to the season finale of We're All Like Other Girls. Did I ever think I would have a season finale of anything? Because I'm such a commitment-ophobe, I've never done anything for longer than a month in my entire fucking life. Round of applause. I don't know exactly what number episode this is. I think it's 23. How did I decide this was going to be the season finale? I just decided. Well, there are reasons. There is method behind the madness. God, my fringe looks so bad. There is method behind the madness, but I will tell you that in a bit. So, season finale. And what better way to do a season finale than a monthly review? Because lo and behold, is that the actual term? You know, oh my God, I saw a TikTok and it was that one where it was like, tell me a word that you've mispronounced your entire life and now it's something you think about all of the time. Like, you know, that TikTok. And this girl was like, oh, what was it? All intensive purposes. She said that she'd been saying all intensive purposes, you know, like, oh, for all intents and purposes. I thought it was that. That phrase is actually for all intents and purposes, which makes total sense, but I did not realize that. Why did I say that? There was somewhere I was going with this. What was I talking about? Monthly reviews. I'm gonna look and edit this back and be like, oh, that's where I was going with that, and that was gonna be a funny story or something. What was I saying? Tell me, remind me. Should I go back and look at the footage? All intents and purposes, monthly reviews. Oh, lo and behold, finally, God, we got there in the end. So I was like, is lo and behold just one of those things? Like, because lo and behold, what does that even like, what does that stand for? What does that mean? Like, low is like low, like, I don't know, low. Let's Google it. And behold. Oh, here we go. Oh, okay. Yeah, it is lo and behold, but it's L-O. Anyway, who fucking cares? I could find that out, but I don't really care enough. It is the end of the month already, and fucking hell, I feel like everyone always says this, but it's like, oh, how did it get to the end of the month? Actually, I do feel like it's October. I think in September I was like, it's March. And now we're in October, I'm like, oh no, it's like nearly Christmas time. Like, that actually makes sense for me now for some reason. So monthly reviews, you know, I always do monthly reviews. I've done August, September. So I've done 2 monthly reviews on the podcast so far. And I've shared lots on Instagram and things like that about monthly reviews. So let's do October's. This month has been a very interesting month, actually. First off, let's start the month with our 490 memory of the month. Now, before this, I was like sitting down, prepping this episode, writing the different areas of the review so I can make sure I hit everything. And I was like, what is my 490 memory? Like, what is the like significant memory that I'm going to look back on and think, damn, I'm so glad I did that. And to be honest, I think my 490 memory experience for this month is just coming out to the US and spending this entire month. This is my first full month in the US, and just coming out here alone. And you might be like, Polly, you travel all the time on your own. Like, yes, I do. Like, I travel predominantly on my own. Like, everywhere I go is always on my own. I think most of the places I travel, I go on my own anyway. But do you know what's been really interesting is you would think that with time it gets easier, that it's kind of scarier the first time, and then the more and more you do it, the more experience you have, the easier it gets, and you get less nervous, less afraid. You just become, like, I guess, used to it. But what I've actually found is it kind of, in my experience, I've kind of had the opposite experience. Like, it's actually getting scarier. I flew to Thailand at 19 years old on my own, no plan. I had £2,000 in my bank account. I don't even know if I had £2,000 actually, because now I'm looking back at it, that seems like an awful lot for myself to have saved up in like 4 months, which is the amount of time I decided I was going to go to Thailand. Just flew there, no plan, backpack. And I remember being scared when I first got to the airport. I remember very vividly getting to Bangkok airport and being like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, none of the signs were in English. Looking back now, I'm like, they probably were, but it felt like nothing was in English. And I was like, God, how do I get to what do I do? And I just sat in the airport for probably like 45 minutes in the arrivals terminal, because I was just like, God, what do I do now? But then after that, I don't remember any periods of fear or anxiety, anxious decision making. I just kind of followed where I wanted to go. I was like, oh, I'm in Thailand. These girls are going to Cambodia. So I went to Cambodia with them. Then I went to Malaysia and spent 2 months in Malaysia. And then I was like, oh, fuck it, I'll just go to Australia. And I don't remember ever having this kind of, God, what shall I do next? Is this the right decision? Like, should I be doing something else? I just remember going with the flow. And as I've gotten older, I feel like, I guess this makes sense. You just become your prefrontal cortex, is it your prefrontal cortex or your frontal lobe? Or are they the same thing? I don't know. Is fully developed now. So I feel like, I just have more of a sense of the things that could go wrong in situations now. When I was in Malaysia, a girl that I'd met we were volunteering together in a dog sanctuary. We hitchhiked the entire country of Malaysia. Just us two. Both of us, our backpacks. I'm 19. She was a little bit older than me, a few years older than me, 22. Just hitchhiked. We went in the back of enormous trucks that picked us up on the side of highways that we would just put our thumbs out and be like, pick us up, please. We're going here. Can you take us near? And I just had no fear. Like, I remember just not being afraid. And I remember telling people that we did that. And they were like, God, what? Like, how were you brave enough? And that was never a thing. I never felt like I was being brave because it didn't feel scary. But I think now things just feel a bit more, I don't know, it's obviously an illusion, but things feel more final. I feel like I overthink decisions more now. And like, if I think of, I could go to New York, instead of being like, yeah, I want to go to New York, I'm going to New York, which I feel like 21-year-old me would have done. I'm now like, okay, but is there a different place I should be going to? Should I be going somewhere else? Should I be prioritizing work over traveling? Should I be prioritizing more serious things over kind of just following random events and just bopping around the US with no plan? I feel like I'm just recently have become, Polly, this is meant to be a 490 memory, not a commentary on your inner workings of your subconscious. I just feel like I've become, or I have noticed myself recently second guessing myself and kind of doubting my own decision making. And so, long story long, the 490 memory has just been coming out here and experiencing it and letting myself feel those things and still doing it and still being out here, still going out, still doing things, not just giving up at the first hurdle and going home, because it has actually been harder this time round. Traveling has just been different this time round. It's also the first time, even though most of my travel has been alone in my lifetime, this is the first time I feel like I've actually spent the majority of it alone. Normally, I think the US just isn't a classic kind of backpackery traveling destination. It's more of like a holiday place and place where people live. And then people do come here on holidays too, but less in, like when people go to Asia, it's so common to, backpack Asia, like hashtag eat, pray, love. You take your backpack over there, you do your like gap year, and everyone's kind of doing the same things. You stay in hostels, that's very normal. Everyone's planning to do the same things, everyone's going to different countries, and you just kind of, it's very social. Same with Australia and New Zealand. Because they have the working holiday visa, there are a lot of people that come over from England, Europe, America, and do their working holidays. And so you're all kind of over there looking for the same experience. You're all, whether you're working together, whether you meet people through the work that you do or the places that you stay, I feel like they are just environments that encourage backpacking, traveling, and as a result, connection and meeting people. Whereas here, most people, everyone I've met just lives here. And so this has been the first time traveling alone where I've done a lot of stuff alone, and I've been house sitting, so I'm not staying in hostels all of the time. The hostels I have stayed in here have been very different to the hostel experiences that I've had in Australia, New Zealand, Asia, Europe, whatever. And so that's just been really interesting, and I'm just proud of myself for staying here, staying true to the reasons that I came here, and just letting myself feel the experience and watch the experience play out, not as just kind of like letting things happen, but just watching the experience play out, seeing what's going on and just watching myself experience this in a new way that I haven't before. And I'm proud of myself for that. And it has been great. Like, Chicago is fucking amazing. If you've never been to Chicago before, I had a feeling I would like it, but I did not realize I would like it as much as I have. It kind of reminds me of New York, even though I've never been to New York. I'm going to New York next week, but Chicago just feels like, it'll be interesting to see the comparison. But when I got to Chicago and I was walking around the city, like all of the skyscrapers are enormous, like beautiful signs, like lots of people, it's very busy, there's lots of traffic, really cool coffee shops, cool bars, cool cafes, just lots of cool stuff going on, like less busy than I imagine New York will be. So it's just been so nice. I love Chicago. I would definitely come back here. I could see myself living here. Oh, I need to do that actually. I'm going to apply for the green card lottery. So this, I'm not sure why I'm telling you this. This is the first time UK girls, if you fancy living in the US and you want a green card, but you don't want to marry for it, the green card lottery has opened for the first time for people from the UK. Normally the UK is exempt from the green card lottery, but this year, for some reason, it's not. And the reason I say that is because if I had a green card, I could see myself picking Chicago as one of the areas that I would come to. It's very nice. Anyway, wow, that was a long intro for the 490 memory. Let's do significant events for this month. So I used my camera roll. I scrolled through my camera roll for October to get some reminders, because the 1st of October, that was 30 days ago. That was a long time ago. I've lived 5 lifetimes since then. I've seen Matty Healy 3 times since then. Lots happens in 30 days. Significant event number 1 is I tried the infamous Air One Hailey Bieber smoothie. I had to do this, and I was walking around Beverly Hills. I remember it clear as day, like it was 30 days ago. Walking around Beverly Hills, strolling around. I got a coffee, sat in a little courtyard, had a croissant actually. And then I was like, okay, this is my last full day in LA. It's now or never. If I'm ever going to try this smoothie, it's going to be now. Would I ever in my life pay $20 for a smoothie? Absolutely fucking not. Although I did pay $25 last night for a vodka and Coke. Can you believe that? It's literally fucking robbery. So I was like, right, I am going to try it, because I feel like at this point, you're not even trying it because you want a smoothie. You're just trying it for the experience. Like, there were so many people there getting it. Like, there was a line of people at the fucking Air One drinks bar trying to get these smoothies. And I do think it's just fantastic branding, and like they've created a fantastic hype around them. And I feel like paying for it, like the amount that it is, has almost become a part of that. You're like, oh, I made $20 on a smoothie. It's the most privileged white bitch shit I've ever done, but I did it anyway. Was it good? Yes, it was good. Would I buy it? If I lived in LA, would I buy it all the time? No, because ultimately it was just a smoothie, and I would never pay $20 for a smoothie. I think that's absolutely extortionate and ridiculous. But it was nice. It was like very sweet. To be honest, it was lovely actually. So that was a significant event in that it was kind of iconic. Would I do it again? Probably not. Next significant event is I joined a new online program that I have been following this guy for a while. His name on Instagram is Father Bronx, or just Bronx, I think is his Instagram, like actual handle. He used to do the marketing and all of like the social media stuff for The Weeknd, like the artist, The Weeknd. And he's done marketing and social media content, everything, for loads of different like cool artists, cool brands. He has a podcast and it has a course type like online program called Make Art Not Content, and it is about making art, not content. It's kind of about like uncoupling from the relationship that we have with content and creating good shit that actually matters. And it's so good. Like his podcast, he doesn't post very often, and the episodes that he does post are only probably like 10 to 15 minutes long, sometimes not even that. But it's just so potent. Every time I listen to one of the episodes, I'm like, wow, that hit so much. And the reason I joined it, I think I'm really seeking to figure out what I want to create and put out there. Like, this has been great. Like this podcast has been such a fun practice for me. But now I'm thinking, okay, like the season 1 is done. We have done 23 episodes. That's quite a lot. And I told myself I wanted to fail fast and just do as many episodes as possible on anything without overthinking it. And then see what I liked, what I didn't like, so that I could move forward with that information to kind of decide the direction that I want to go in, which was so essential. So now I'm like, right, now I've done that and I have lots of data. I've tried lots of things with the pod. What do I want to do next? And just like my brand, business, life, whatever. And this online program, Make Art Not Content, was just so perfect for what I feel like I need. It's so good. I so recommend it. If you're interested in content, branding yourself or branding something, creating your own thing. It's so good. Significant event number 3, I gave a 5-star rating to a book. And I think that deserves an honorable mention because I do not give 5 stars very often. I think it'll be interesting to see how many 5 stars I've given this year. A few. I've read a few really good books this year, but probably less than 5 have been 5 stars. So this book that I gave 5 stars to is The Fourth Wing by... what is her name? By Rebecca Yarros. And it is the first book in a series, the Empyrean series. It is fantastic. It is fantasy, it is dragons, it is relationships, it is kind of like romantasy. And I loved it. If you like A Court of Thorns and Roses, like the ACOTAR series, which I personally loved, I do love romantasy. I definitely love... So normally I prefer more fantasy than romance. So if a book is too on the kind of... like, I love reading fantasy. That is my favorite fiction genre. But if it's too on the romance, like smutty side, sometimes that can put me off. It depends how it's done. Like, I've read books where I feel like the smut has ruined the book for me. But then some books, it really adds to it. And so Fourth Wing is really fun because it definitely is romantasy, but I feel like it starts off with a bit of like tension, and there is definitely like love interests in the air. And then all of a sudden, okay, there are just a few scenes that are so sexual. And I was like, it was like a jump scare, but in a fun way. I really, really liked it. And I loved the plot. Very classic, like fantasy plot. The main character is a girl. She's not super strong. She's not super active, good at anything. And she has to trial out to become a dragon rider, which I feel like is very common fantasy trope. Like, character is not very strong, not cut out for this, like hasn't had practice, and then has to go through these like incredible trials to like get to the end result. I feel like that's not uncommon in fantasy, especially like more young adult fantasy. Or I don't think this is young adult fantasy, but I think this is more fantasy romance more than like real deep fantasy. I really like how the whole series isn't out yet. It's kind of reminiscent of that. Not Harry Potter, because I didn't get to Harry Potter until later, and by the time I got to Harry Potter, all of the Harry Potters were, say Harry Potter 5 times fast, all of them were already out. But with Twilight, I got into Twilight when I think only the first 2 books were out. I think New Moon was out by the time I started. So that, you know, when you had to wait for the next book to come out, and it was so exciting, and you read it and you were like, okay, well, I need the next one now. Like, where is it? So this is kind of reminiscent of that, and that's been really fun. So I'm really excited to read the next one. I think I have a friend who I think she works for the publisher who are publishing Fourth Wing, and she said the new one is coming out really soon, in the next like month. So I'm really excited to be the next one. So that felt like an honorable mention. If you're looking for like a fun fantasy romance book, it's fun. I love anything with dragons. If you have dragon recommendation, like dragon book recommendations, I love them. What other significance event? Oh my God. 1989 Taylor's version has been released. Now, I was excited for this one. I've been excited for all of the Taylor's version re-releases, but this one in particular, because this album, 1989, has both some of my favorite Taylor Swift songs ever and some of my least favorite Taylor Swift songs ever. So I was very interested to hear this album's, the re-released versions, and see what changed in opinions. Now, not much has changed, to be honest. Like, my favorites are still my favorites with the re-releases, and my least favorites are still my least favorites with the re-releases. Shall I tell you what they are? So, least favorites, Shake It Off. I fucking hate that song. I think it's just annoying. Like, I just find it annoying, and I just don't listen to it. Like, if it came on, I would actively skip it. But that's fine. Like, love Taylor. Like, love her. Like, no hate to her. Love you, Taylor. Bad Blood, don't love it. Would never listen to it. Style, I'm sorry. I know people love Style, and it's like the whole Harry Styles thing. But for me, Style doesn't do it for me. Same with, there's one more. Wait, I have to get the album up. Also, Blank Space. So I think maybe it's just like all of the hits. They're just not my favorite. But it does have This Love. that song, when you're young, you just run, but you come back to what you need. Oh, it's so good. You Are in Love. Oh my God, nothing makes me feel more hopeful about love and romantic relationships than You Are in Love by Taylor Swift. I think that song is absolutely marvelous. If you need to feel that kind of warm, happy, cozy feeling of being in love, listen to that song. I think it's so good. I'm just going through the album now. New Romantics I think is so fucking fun. I literally think New Romantics is such an anthem. It makes me feel so happy and young and free, and I just think it's so fun. The Vault tracks, now I feel like the Swifties are loving these Vault tracks. Like, I've seen people say these are her best Vault tracks. I personally don't agree. Right now, these aren't my favorite. Like, some of the Vault tracks from the other albums, particularly from Speak Now and also Red, I feel like the Vault tracks are so good. Maybe I just haven't listened to these enough, because it did take me a while to warm up to the Speak Now ones as well. So it's only been, what day is it? The 30th of October, and it came out on the 27th. So it's only been 3 days. Personally, my favorites for the Vault tracks at the moment are Suburban Legends. I think that's so fun. And I love Is Over Now. I think that's really fun. They're like my favorites at the moment. But I'll keep you posted. That felt like an important honorable mention because iconic behavior. Like, every time there's a re-release, I just think Taylor Swift is my idol. Just the fact that she's re-releasing all of her songs as a fuck you is just iconic. And now she gets the rights and the money to all of her songs, and the guys that fucked her over get nothing. So fuck them. I feel like that's kind of it for significant events. Oh, last night I went to see the 1975. Shocker. I bet you guys are so surprised. And they played one of my top 10 songs, or I don't have a top 10 list. I basically have a list on my phone called Songs I Would Kill My Mum to Hear Live. And they played last night one of those songs. They played You, and You're Alive, at least as far as I can tell, you are. And I said, do you wanna dance? Do you wanna dance? Do you wanna dance? In the back of the hall. Anyway, so they played You, and I cried, and it was so fun. I love going to see the 1975. And the thing is, it was so funny because my friend was like, how many times have you seen the 1975 this year? What is wrong with you? And I was like, I'm seeing them 4 more times before the end of the year. And maybe even more than that. So the show changes so much every show, and this is why you can go to many of them. Like, if the show was the same every single time, you could get away with going once or maybe twice if you loved them. The show changes constantly. You never know which songs you're going to get. You never know what's going to happen. So I have to go. If I didn't go last night because I was like, oh, I've already seen them 5 times, I wouldn't have seen one of my songs that I would kill my mum for. Love you, mum, sorry. And I feel like the more shows I go to, the more people I know at the shows, like actual fans wise, I'm just like starting to make some really good friends who are at the shows. So it's really fun because now whenever I go to the shows, I kind of recognize people, and it's like, oh, I'm just here to see my friends and my band. So anyway, that's the significant events for this month. Those are actually very small, but kind of, I didn't want to give like, oh, I'm in Chicago and I'm in Colorado, because those are kind of obvious. These are kind of like little things that I think summarize the month for me. We've done 490 significant events, accomplishments for this month. Now I think I kind of touched on one of the accomplishments in that I haven't actually written down, but in that I've been traveling has felt very different this time, and I'm very proud of being able to, because it's not actually been easy, to be honest. And you might be like, cry me a fucking river, like, oh, traveling on your own is hard, like having the freedom to do whatever you want to do, that must be so hard for you. I know, like, cry me a fucking river. And I'm annoyed at myself as well, and I get, this is one of the spirals I get in, because I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, why people would cut off their left arm to have this opportunity, and I'm here bitching and complaining and having existential crises about what should I be doing next, and how am I making the most of this opportunity, and is there something else that I should be doing? Is there something more aligned I should be doing? Am I wasting time? Am I going to look back at this time and think I should have done something differently? My mind is a confusing place sometimes. So I'm really proud of kind of, I don't want to say sticking it out, because that makes it sound like I'm kind of forcing myself here against my will, which I'm not. I do want to be here, but I'm proud of persevering through the harder parts and the kind of like mental challenges that I've been having, and trying to just see it for what it is and just like be in the experience rather than trying to change it and trying to change how I feel. So I'm proud of that. So that was an accomplishment. But I think my biggest accomplishment for this month, in terms of like tangible accomplishments, is this podcast. Sticking with the podcast for 23 episodes, however long that's been. I definitely started in June or July. Maybe even before then, I can't remember. I'm really proud of that as a serial commitmentophobe and someone who has never stuck at anything for longer than a month, like I mentioned before, showing up to this podcast consistently has been quite eye-opening for me, and it almost didn't matter what it was. I think the reason I just picked a podcast was because I wanted to prove to myself that I could stick to something, because one of the beliefs that I have about myself, which is not necessarily true, well, I guess like no beliefs are like objectively true because you can change them and you can just start thinking different thoughts, and your beliefs are just thoughts that you've thought over and over and over again. But one of the beliefs I've held about myself for a long time is that I can't stick to anything, and that I start things and then stop them and I never see anything through. And that's been quite damaging, because I think when you believe things, it's prophetic. You believe things and then they become true. And so I would start things and then stop them, and then I would use that as confirmation that I can never stick to anything. But with this podcast, I basically just wanted to prove to myself that I could stick at something that I wanted to do, and I have. And especially because it hasn't, again, here I go with the fucking Crimea River. There have been so many episodes where I've sat down and halfway through, like I edit these episodes, so there's bits that I cut out in between things that I'm saying. And there are so many times where I'm saying things like, oh my God, this is so fucking boring. Nobody is going to want to listen to this. Or I will stop myself mid-sentence and be like, what is wrong with me? Why am I even talking about this? Or I will sit for like 2 or 3 hours before the podcast, procrastinating it and putting it off and putting off doing it and trying to come up with reasons why I shouldn't do it, because I feel like it's not good enough, or I feel like it's not funny, or I feel like it's not interesting, or I feel like everyone's doing the same. And I'll go on YouTube and watch other people's podcasts that are so highly edited and well scripted, interesting and engaging. And I just have so much I don't even want to say imposter syndrome. I just have so much self-doubt with doing this podcast and putting myself online in this way, especially because it's the beginning, and I don't know, but it also doesn't feel like the beginning. So I'm like, should this be more successful than it is right now? What even is success? Like, what do I want this to look like? I think the thing is, like, imposter syndrome and self-doubt, in the moment, it doesn't feel like imposter syndrome and self-doubt. It feels like I'm a piece of shit. I'm boring. Nobody would want to listen to what I'm saying. Why would anyone care about what I'm saying? There are already people who are prettier and funnier and more engaging and more interesting that have podcasts like this, so why would anyone listen to mine? Blah, blah, blah. And so those feelings, like, you can't identify in the moment that it's like imposter syndrome or self-doubt. It just feels like I'm a piece of shit. And so there have been so many moments like that for this podcast, just like showing up to film episodes, coming up with ideas for episodes. I will be like typing out episode ideas, and in the back of my mind there is a voice or a feeling of, what is the even fucking point in doing this? Nobody cares about you and what you're saying. Like, you have nothing interesting to say. No angle that you have is unique or interesting. Why would anyone care? You're just embarrassing yourself. Stop doing this. That is how this podcast feels so much of the time. But I'm so proud that I haven't allowed those thoughts and feelings kind of stop me from doing it, because no matter where this podcast goes, I've been learning things, and I've learned how to edit podcasts, and I've learned how to consistently put up long form video. And yeah, so I'm really happy that I've done that. And now we're on the season finale, and who knows where it's going to go next, but wherever it goes, I'm proud of that. So that's a huge accomplishment for this month. Okay, lessons learned this month. There's 2 that I've written down, and one is a lesson that I actually learned from somebody else, from a podcast / book. And one is one that I've learned on reflection through myself. So the first one is, I was listening to a podcast. It was the Rich Roll podcast, Arthur Brooks. The episode was with, and he wrote a book with Oprah. They co-wrote a book on how to be happy and on happiness. And so I was listening to this episode, and Arthur says that happiness is brought about by 3 things: satisfaction, purpose, and enjoyment. And so he breaks down all of these things. But something that really stood out to me was he was talking about enjoyment. And he said there is a difference between pleasure and enjoyment. And a lot of the time we mistake pleasure for enjoyment, and we chase the pleasure, but pleasure can rarely lead to long-term enjoyment, which is an enormous factor in happiness and feeling and experiencing happiness. And he said the difference between, and I thought this was fascinating, the difference between pleasure and enjoyment is people and memories. And so if you're doing something primarily on your own, if you're doing something that is bringing you dopamine, like giving you that dopamine hit, and you're alone, it is likely an experience of pleasure. And there are going to be caveats to this, so like don't come at me with your like fucking bean soup gate. For example, scrolling social media, binge watching TV series, scrolling our phones, eating junk food, I guess like alcohol and drugs are kind of a more severe version. Those things alone, those all kind of in the moment, they feel enjoyable, right? Like, you know, if you've had like a kind of a shit day, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling stressed out, when you go on, if you sit on your phone for an hour or you binge watch 4 episodes of your TV series, that feels good. Like you feel like you're relaxing your body because it feels nice. What you're feeling is pleasure. If you add people and memories, that is when pleasure becomes enjoyment. And so let's take the watching your TV series example. Do it if you did that alone, you just sat in your room on your own, watch TV series, that creates pleasure. If you invited a friend round and you were like, let's have a themed dinner and then binge watch 4 episodes of Gilmore Girls, Gossip Girl, whatever you're watching. I'm actually watching Grace and Frankie at the moment and it's so fucking good. I'm on season 4 and I'm trying to go slow because I don't want it to be done because I don't know, I'm scared it's going to end sadly. And yeah, I'm not ready to cope with that yet. If you invited a friend round and had a themed dinner and then sat down and watched the same amount of episodes, that involves people, you're making memories because you're together and you're having this like themed dinner experience. That's still releasing the dopamine, so you're still going to feel the same. And that type of experience is going to lead to enjoyment, which is a key component to happiness. And the more I kind of went through examples in my mind, I was like, that's so true. Like eating junk food alone gives the huge dopamine response that you want, hence why an enormous coping mechanism for people, and people is me, is like binge eating and comfort eating is because it creates that dopamine here. But when you're doing it alone, you're just seeking the pleasure of the food. If you go out and eat junk food with your friend, or you like jump in the car at midnight with your sister and go and get McDonald's takeaway and like listen to music all the way there, people, memories, it's just a different experience. It's the same thing. You're still eating junk food, but adding people and memories into it is a way to experience enjoyment rather than pleasure. And so that for me, I don't know, I heard that and I hope that the way that I explained it allowed it to hit for you too. I 10 out of 10 recommend going and listening to the episode. It's quite long, like rich roll podcasts tend to be quite long. I think it's like 2.5 hours. I personally, that's my perfect length for an episode. I do not know how people talk for that long. Maybe it would be easier if it was a conversation, but I personally cannot podcast for that long. But it's really good. I added it to my, that's what I'll do. I will add it to my it's in my top tier podcast episode playlists on Spotify. So I'll just link that below. So any podcast I listen to where I'm like, holy shit, that was fucking amazing, I add to this playlist, mainly so I can go back and listen to them. But I don't think I've ever shared that playlist, but I will put that in the description so you can go and listen to that and like browse those episodes. The second one that I've kind of learned through reflecting and watching myself experience things and just watching, I guess just journaling, because a lot of my realizations about where I'm at, what I need, etc. come through journaling, is that you're never stuck in who you become and who you feel like you are right now. And I think the reason that this has become quite prominent for me recently is because I feel like the person I was a year ago or 2 years ago was in a lot of ways so much better than the person I am now. I feel like I'm lazier now. I used to get up at 5 a.m. every single day without an alarm and go for a walk, listen to a podcast, come back, meditate, breath work all day. I used to be such a like little productive bitch. And I think maybe I went too far the other way and maybe I'm just kind of recoiling like an elastic band. And before that, I used to like bodybuild and go to the gym all the time and I was so health conscious. And I think I've gone through a few different stages, but right now I think I've just been really comparing myself to past versions, and in a lot of ways I've become less like the person I want to be, which has been really kind of an interesting, stark realization. And I've been feeling quite negative about that lately. I've been feeling like, God, why have I let myself go almost? Like, I don't say I let myself go, but so many of the things that I used to do, I no longer do. And that's been kind of, that's been it's been like a negative realization. I realized I'd been journaling for a week. Every time I sat down to journal, I would be writing things that I didn't like about myself. And I'd be writing like, I wish I did this differently. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, but I can, you know? Okay, I used to do that. I don't do it anymore. Okay, could I do that again if I wanted to? I used to wake up at 5 a.m. Now I don't. If I wanted to, which I don't particularly, but that's just an example, I could. You're never stuck in who you think you've become, even if you've been doing it for years and years and years. Even if the person you are, whoever you are, you can change it. And yes, it gets hard. I think it does get harder as you get older, but you're never stuck. So if there's something that you're doing right now that you really don't like about yourself, or you really don't like that you're doing, you have your lifetime to change that. And I'm not saying like wait until you're 50 to change it, but like you are existing on this planet right now. You could make steps towards changing the things that you don't necessarily like about yourself. And I'll give you one example is this is not something that I've ever been good at, but I feel like it's kind of come to light that it's something that I want to be. And that is keeping up with friends. I have a lot of friends, all of my friends basically don't live in the same place, different countries, different walks of life, different priorities, different goals, and love all of that for all of them. But I have always been kind of notoriously and famously around, like with my friends, bad at getting in touch and replying to messages. And I used to think that was kind of funny, and I used to be like, oh, but that's just who I am. Like, oh, my friends just have to get it. I used to just think that was like a fine way to be. And I think that it is. And I don't think you have to find what works. But I realized that if I want friends and I want my friends to feel valued, like I still want them in my life, I can't be waiting 7 days to respond to a voice note. And I realized recently that I was saying like, God, I'm such a bad friend. Like all of my friends are going to reject me, but all of my friends are going to like distance themselves from me because I never stay in contact with them. Okay, so change it. Like stay in contact with them. You know, like you get to decide how you're acting, and right now the way you've been behaving up until this point is one thing. I can change that. Like I don't always have to be the person who is not good at getting back to people, because that's not who I want to be. And so I thought that was a good lesson for this month. Well, that's something that's been very prominent for me this month. Is like, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, you're not stuck in that. You're not a tree. You can move, you can do other things, you can behave differently. Life-changing. Flops for this month. The main thing I think is kind of a continuation of that. It's just all of my healthy habits have just gone out of the window this month, which is crazy because in my mind I was like, oh, I'm going to be in a house, I'm going to be house sitting, I'm going to be able to like wake up early, stretch, meditate, do yoga, blah, blah, blah. For some reason, I just haven't been able to be doing that. I think, God, I just bore myself with this, but my mind feels very, I think I just need to do more fucking meditation, to be honest, because my mind just feels so all over the place, trying to figure out what I'm doing next with my career and my places to live. I feel like my Maslow hierarchy of needs, my fundamental base, like the first level of my human needs are not met yet. Like the shelter and the money for food and things like that, just like for basic human needs, are not being met yet. Not that I don't have money for food, but I just mean my income isn't stable at the moment. My housing situation isn't stable at the moment. Like I'm constantly moving around. So I feel like my fundamental things that kind of allow for a relaxed nervous system are maybe not being met. And because of that, it's been harder to do the things, like the little healthy habits. So I feel like my yoga, my exercise has gone out of the window. I'm sitting on my phone for ages before I go to bed, which is not like me. I'm watching lots and lots of TV series and films, which is not like me. And I think all of those things are fine in moderation and when done in the correct environment with the correct context, not like done because they're fun and they're like a fun addition to your life. Like, oh, I haven't sat on my phone all day. I'm going to sit on my phone for half an hour and scroll TikTok because I want to see what's going on there. That is a different energy than I'm scrolling TikTok at 3 a.m. because my nervous system's too fucked to go to sleep and I feel too anxious to put my phone down. Do you see what I mean? So it's never the action, it's always the intention behind it. Like binge watching a series is absolutely fine, depending on the intention and reasoning and like the vibe behind it, I guess. And all of my vibes have been off. So that was my huge flop for this month, which is fine. But what is annoying is I feel like every month that is my flop. So that needs to be addressed. I don't know how. I don't know what I'm going to do about that yet, but that needs to be addressed because I'm looking through, because I write these down, like these monthly reviews, so I can kind of go back. And if I look at my flops for the past few months, it's kind of, they've all kind of been doing that, like spending too much time on your phone, not prioritizing your sleep, not prioritizing your energy, etc. So that needs to be addressed. maybe that'll be my goal for next month. In fact, let's do goals for next month now, shall we? Good segue, Polly. God, it's like you have a podcast or something. Okay, goals for next month. My 2 priorities for next month. Well, let me tell you my plans for next month. So I'm house sitting here until November, and here being Chicago, until November the 4th. Oh no, yeah. And then I'm staying in Chicago for a few more days. Then I'm flying to New York. Wait, why did I sing that and not Welcome to New York? It's been waiting for you. Welcome to New York. Welcome to New York. Taylor's version, obviously. I can't wait to take a video flying into New York and put Welcome to New York as the soundtrack. Guys, I have an entire playlist on TikTok of audios from Gossip Girl that I want to film while I'm in New York. Basically, like, that's going to be my whole time in New York, is trying to find iconic places to do iconic audios. So that's like my travel plans. And then I'm going to be in New York for a week or so. I'm not sure. I do know the dates, but I just off the top of my head, I don't know. And then I'm flying back to England in the middle of November. So I'm basically spending half of November in the US and then half of November in the UK. So my intention for this time is, 1, the podcast is rebranding the podcast. So there will be no episodes this month. I want to now, with the information that I have from putting out all of these episodes, and information being the episodes that you guys enjoyed, I'm looking through the analytics, seeing the retention, like how long you watch the episodes before you cut off. Like, do you watch the whole thing? Do you watch halfway? Which topics have been most interesting to you? Which episodes have I got the most responses from? So on that aspect, like looking at the data and saying like, okay, like what do people like? And also what I like and what I find really fun to film, and just, I think, coming up with a focus. Season 1 for We're All Like Other Girls has literally been like, whatever I want to talk about, I'm going to, because I just need to get into the habit of putting things out and seeing. And that was kind of the only intention with We're All Like Other Girls. And I said that in the first episode, like that was always the intention, was just to put out anything and everything and not worry about a niche or a brand yet. I just needed to get over the hump. Now we're over the hump. Now we're on Alice the Camel has 2 humps, and we are on the second hump, and that hump is branding. And so I just want to focus the podcast now. And I don't know what this is going to fully look like yet. I'm going through my make art, not content modules. It's so funny because this is what I do for work. Like, I have helped brands and businesses come up with unique series ideas for them, like do their branding, their social media strategy. And it's so interesting because I think it's so easy to do to somebody else. I can look at a brand, or I can look at a person. You could come to me. I have so many friends who are like, I want to do online things. They could come to me, and I can so easily like read people and read what they're trying to do and come up with like a cohesive brand, unique selling proposition, all of that shit. I find so easy. As soon as it's yourself, there is such a mental block there for me with coming up with like a brand, a focus, a focal point for We're All Like Other Girls. But that's what I want. I want the next iteration of We're All Like Other Girls to be a little bit more focused, a little bit more structured, have a little bit more reasoning behind it. Just so, because I think that's how you grow a podcast, essentially, is you need to have a reason for people to come to it every week. People aren't just going to come. There's so much content online now. People don't just come and listen to a 40-minute podcast of someone talking about their lives. Like, or they do, but you need a unique perspective behind it. There needs to be something behind it. It needs to be cohesive. November, I'm going to spend rebranding or branding the podcast, preparing for season 2, although it's not going to be season 2. There's actually going to be an interim because I am going to do podmas. I'm going to do podmas in December, which is also why I wanted to end this season now, because then I can have November to prepare for podmas. So that's my main goal in terms of, I guess, like worky type things. And then a personal goal is just to connect back to the healthy vibes again. Just like healthy in my mind and body. Like get back with that meditation, get back to yoga. As soon as I get back to the UK, I'll join my yoga studio again. So I'll be doing yoga like 4 or 5 times a week, which will be really nice. Start my writing practice every morning again, or just like recommit to writing every morning again. consistently, like regardless of how I feel, because at the moment all of my habits are so determined by how I feel, which is not how you should determine your habits. Like that's actually the worst way to commit to habits. Like they're going to be my 2 focuses for next month. It's very kind of boring and mundane, not very exciting at all. It's going to be fun. And I'm going to be in New York. So obviously take loads of videos and live my very best Blair and Serena life. That was it. Thank you so much. Like if you're listening to the end of this, you've probably listened to many We're All Like Other Girls episodes, and I appreciate that so much. I mean, you've heard in this episode, this podcast takes everything from me to not quit. And just because I feel so much self-doubt and so much judgment towards myself, and I mean, that's fucking boring to listen to, but just know that I feel like I come across quite confident and quite self-assured with the content that I put out, maybe because I'm just a loud speaker and I speak quite quick, so it makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about. Deep inside, there is a very, very scared girl who feels like she has nothing of importance or interest to say. But I think part of me knows that that's not true. I have like I have like the angel and the devil, although they're both kind of devils, because one of them is like, you have nothing of interest to say. But then the other one's like, I know that that's not true, because I would never say that about anybody else on the planet. Like I think everyone has something interesting to say. So I would never say that about anyone. But then I'm like, why can't I find mine? Like, what is my unique place? Like, where does We're All Like Other Girls fit in? But I guess that's for next month to plan out. So if you haven't done your monthly review, 10 out of 10 recommend doing yours. And I will be back in December, hopefully rebranded, restored, new podcast. You're not even going to recognize me. Well, you definitely are going to recognize me because I'm still going to be the same person. But hopefully the pod will just have a little bit more focus. I don't even know what that's going to look like yet, so I'm excited, but I hope you stick around. I hope to do some fun things on the We're All Like Other Girls Instagram whilst we're kind of waiting for the podcast to be reset up. So go and have a look there if you're not. Love you so much. If you're listening to this, you really care what I have to say, because I've been chatting shit for the past 10 minutes now. Love you loads. I'm going to probably go to the grocery store now. See you in season 2. Mwah.